Hello, everybody there in LinkedIn land and beyond. We are here with another live stream, another episode, wherever you're listening, wherever you're watching. It is Freeformers Unplugged. And for the first time in a long time, I haven't got a special guest. I've got a very special guest. I had to just quickly dig myself out of that hole because I'm delighted to have Emilie back. Hey, Emilie.
Hello. Yeah, you did have to dig yourself out of that hole, didn't you?
I was like, so Emily isn't a special guest. So what is she? Oh, very special guest. I
Lovely.
think I masked over that quite well. How are you? We haven't spoken today yet.
No, we haven't, other than the 30 seconds in the green room. I am doing very well. I am delighted to be back. Like, actually delighted. I was like, it's in my calendar. I was like, oh, I'm really looking forward to this. But I haven't done much talking to many people today, so I'm not sure what's going to come out. Everyone be warned.
That is the very nature of Freeformers Unplugged. Is we literally have no idea what we're talking about. And I think last week's episode was quite interesting because we had three people, myself and Dib and Sonia, and quite a free form conversation as it was, took us down all sorts of routes. So let's see where this one takes us, because as ever we've set a broad topic and we're going to just dive into it for about 45 minutes, see where we get to. And if you are watching, if you are in chat, give us a little hello. We are doing it at a newer time. Emilie, this is the first time Emilie's live streamed at lunchtime. Usually it's kind of early afternoon, mid-afternoon on a Wednesday, but we're doing lunchtime today.
I thought you changed it. Yeah, we've now changed it. I thought we were now at lunchtime. We'll be lunchtime for the foreseeable future, right?
Yeah, lunchtime seems a better place to do it. Grab your food, have some chat, and see what we can do. I've not actually had my lunch yet because I don't think anybody wants to watch me eat lunch whilst live streaming. That would be gross. Anyway, the title of today's live stream is called Headcount to Heart Count, the Commerciality-to-Humanity Scale. And just the work we've done in the past couple of years, which feels very weird saying that now that we're talking years now rather than months, which is worrying. And worrying in that the passage of time is just relentless. And we've kind of come up with this concept, which we're going to talk a little bit more about now in terms of the Commerciality-to-Humanity Scale. And I'm going to talk about my interpretation of it, and then we'll talk about your interpretation of it, because I think we have these slightly different maybe articulations of what we're doing, and as we define and write down what we do, this is how me and Emilie get stuff done. So the commerciality
on a live stream in front of lots of other people.
The Commerciality-to-Humanity Scale, I've always described it as that there are as a spectrum almost, that you can be either super commercial or super people focused, and you are somewhere on that spectrum, right? So I think of some of the business people that we worked with in the past. They are thoroughly commercial at the expense of the humanity element of their organization. And we've worked with people that are just focused on the people element and have almost zero commercial acumen. And I just want to, something kind of came to my mind when we were getting ready for this, is that I remember a post a while ago talking about that HR is always, like, someone kind of going, HR's always has to be commercial. We are commercial. We reduce headcount. We do all this kind of stuff. And I think commerciality isn't necessarily just about saving money, cutting costs, and all that kind of stuff. It's how do you become a revenue generator? How do you apply entrepreneurship to make money, essentially? And I think that's where I come from in defining commerciality, is like, how do you understand the stuff you're doing and how to make money out of it? And that's one thing, I think, primarily because of my dad and his dad being entrepreneurs, that I've kind of just observed that behavior a lot. But what I haven't observed necessarily is the really human stuff. How do you take care of people, look after people, and get the best out of them? So I've always described it as like you are at one point on that spectrum, and it's this balance between the two, and where you want to be is in the middle. But most business functions exist in this commercial world, and most HR functions exist in this people world, this humanity world, and therefore they're two different languages, two different styles, and that's where the conflict comes, that no one really exists in the middle. But what's your take, Emilie? Because you briefly alluded to it in the green room, and it's super interesting.
Well, I was trying to think. Well, I think first of all, your definition of commerciality is really interesting, and probably, like you said, fits with your experience and the role that you take. I think there's another element of commerciality as well, which is that saving money function. I think that is important. Delivering things on time to budget. I think of the people who are very either entrepreneurial or entrepreneurs, if you like that term. You can go out and find things and find the work, but then never necessarily deliver it. So I do think there's that element as well. Always keeping literally the bottom line, not just the top line and the exciting, innovative stuff in mind, but literally the bottom line. How is this? How are you making profit? So I think there's a couple of sides of commerciality, and I think you lean more into one, and possibly I lean more into the other, shall we say? So, but I was also thinking, if you're the kind of person the kind of leader, let's say, who really cares, really genuinely cares about the people that you are employing, you have to be commercially minded or you're not going to have a sustainable business. So the question I asked you in the green room is, does it always have to be conflicting? Because we've always talked about it in terms of you're at one end of the scale or the other, or hopefully somewhere in the middle. But actually, could it be you could have levels of both? Think of it more like a vertical graph in terms of, oh, I'm 65% commercial and I'm 65% human, and they're not directly competing with each other, because the best commercial people care enough about their people to keep them in a job. Because if you just go down the state of, giving everybody exactly what they want, never mind that what they want isn't necessarily what they need, like, chances are your business is going to go down the pan. So that was my musing as I was hanging the washing out at lunchtime.
That's like you briefly, like I say, you briefly said it in the green room, and it's kind of prompted this thought process in that a lot of the stuff we talk about is mutual lifetime value, right? The equitable relationship between employee and employer, and I think what you've just described there leans more into that. It's almost another vector of defining mutual lifetime value is a measurement of like organizational equity between employees and employers. But I suppose with this scale or this percentage, you're almost looking at as an individual basis, that how are you, and it's not necessarily value driven by that point, it's almost approach driven.
Explain more.
Okay. Well, please. I think so. I like this idea of like there are two buckets, and you can be full of one, empty of the other, halfway and halfway. And I think it's when you look at the humanity element, and hello Sarah, by the way, that's popping up in chat. Hope you're well. Not seen you for a while on our live stream, so welcome back. Is that you've got this commerciality lens. I don't see now. I'm going to talk myself out of it, because I think if you are a thoroughbred commercial person, in the people I've talked to and met, that comes at the expense of humanity and the people that you work for. And I think we've seen over the past couple of years a number of case studies where that's true. But to the other end is that I've seen people that solely just focus on the people element, right? Even, we're not called a HR team, we're called a people team. We're people focused, we're people centric, we're blah, 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 blah. And it's like, but all of that is said with just a really intense human lens that almost just ignores commerciality. And so I think the reason why I now question the two buckets and how much are they filled up is, it's just, in my experience, what I've seen is that very few people manage that balance.
So let me come at you with possibly supporting your point, possibly not. I haven't really worked out the end of the sentence yet. We've done some work recently with a company that's very commercial focused and very, very focused on targets, right? To the point that they are creating a not great experience for the people that work who work there. And so actually the commercial success of their business is not doing well because they are losing people left, right, and center. And so therefore they're having to replace them. Recruitment's really expensive. They're investing in these people, and after 3, 6, 9, whatever it is months, they're all leaving. So they've got a retention problem. And so if you were a really commercially sensible entity, you would recognize the opportunity uh, of people to be revenue generating. You have to, you have to invest upfront costs. But if you've chosen the right people and given them the right environment, the right tools to do the job that's right for them, then the opportunity is so much higher and the potential revenue returns are off the scale. But I think it comes down to people who are thoroughbred commercial think, and the same with people who are thoroughbred humans, the thoroughbred people focused people are very restricted in what they measure, and they're not thinking bigger, they're not thinking holistically, my favorite word of the week, they're not thinking strategically in the same way to encompass both sides. So perhaps you're right, perhaps you're wrong. Ultimately, I think people are measuring the wrong things.
Well, and it's an interesting one. So the case that you mentioned there, in the people that we're working with have recognized it. That's why they came to us, right? They came to us. We didn't go to them and say, "Hey, you've got a problem." They came to us and went, "We know we have this problem. We know it's costing us money, but and they almost have zero idea on how to fix it. Like, it is just not within their wheelhouse, in their brain space, about what do I do to affect this change, because we just don't know." And so when you think about some of the concepts that we're explaining, which I would consider foundational in a people-centric approach in an organization, they just don't have that awareness. So it's like, you don't know what you don't know. It's not that they don't, it's not necessarily about their values and their purpose and what they believe in and how they should work with their people, but it's just like, they have designed, as many organizations that we've talked about before, they design organizations in their own image, and therefore only if you are you will you be successful in that organization. I've talked about a company I used to work for, that their mission was to create a company that we always wanted to work for. It's like, that's great, but that only works to a point if you keep hiring people like yourselves. And as far as I'm aware, in terms of your strategic vision about who you want to hire and recruit, you don't want to do that. But then if anybody else different comes into that organization, the whole thing gets a bit broken.
Yeah, so perhaps we are in agreement that they kind of are two extremes of a scale, but actually what you want is a balance, and it doesn't have to be a perfect balance, a 1-for-1 ratio at all, because every organization looks different, and also different people look different and need different things. But at the same time, I think, yeah, that's absolutely it. So I've taught myself around in a full circle that actually what I am describing as the people who are the most commercially savvy actually have that empathy and that people mindedness in there as well.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, and I think it's if I was to use your metric, right, for the people we're talking about, commercial savviness is like right at the top. Like, they know what they're doing, in that regard. I don't think their empathy and human connection is right to the top, but I don't think it's really low, actually. I think it's kind of, they're in this 50 to 75% bit, but the missing gap there. So that's in kind of attitudinal measures. But actually, if I was going to look, if I was going to then revert that to how that's demonstrated in the organization, I'd say the commercial stuff stays up here, but then the application of the human stuff is much lower, even though they are thinking the right way and have the best intentions, the application is super low. So I think maybe there's different ways to analyze it. Well, it's pedal out an old former freeformers formula: the skill set plus mindset equals behavior equals impact, right? So what is in your skill set and what is in your mindset? So what is the commercial and human focused mindset, and then the skill set? That's quite kind of interesting, I guess.
And when we talk about skill set, if we're talking in the context of an organization or a business rather than an individual, we're talking about the frameworks, the policies, the culture, all of those things as well, I think kind of fit in that skill set element, because it's what's within your power to do as an individual. You're like, oh, I can't do this because there's no policy, there's no framework, I can't follow. I literally can't do this.
Yeah. Sarah's popped up in chat. Let's read this out loud together. I start with the employee experience, what needs to happen in brackets commercially, and what is the most reasonable way to humanly deliver this. The litmus test for me is how would I feel being part of this process change, recipient of this news update. And that's it, right? I think that leans into that most business leaders, like I say, solely commercially focused business leaders, and I've done this before, and this kind of leads into what we're going to talk about, is like, I don't necessarily care about how I'm saying the message. I just care that you hear it and that you understand it, because it is critically important that you understand this information without any necessary storytelling on how that happens, because it's like, well, the very success of our business, the very fabric of this project or whatever, is kind of gonna live or die based on you knowing this information. And so I've talked about this in the past in terms of my leadership style. That's to my detriment. Whereas, like, either you're on the bus or you're not on the bus, and this is the way the world is. Either do it or don't. And if you don't do it, then you're an enemy. And if you do it, you're my best friend.
Black and white extreme thinking right there. I think, Sarah, your point is really interesting, that litmus test. It works if you're someone, I'm assuming, like you, who has the kind of ability and empathy and has enough experience and diverse people around them to think about how other people might achieve it. Because if you're someone like Toby, you're like, well, I'd be fine with that. And I would say most people wouldn't necessarily always react in the same way, which is, again, it's just why it's really great to have a variety of people around you and to test things and get user insights and all of that.
Well, and it goes back to the basis of human-centered design, right? That one litmus test is, how would I feel about receiving that message, which gets you to a point. And again, if we think about some of the business leaders we work with, they essentially design those organizations based on how they think and feel, but not how everybody else thinks and feels. And this is where, user insight, persona mapping, and all that kind of stuff becomes really useful, because, like, you're not just designing it for one kind of person, you're designing it for a multitude of people, and what lands with one person well will not land with another person very well at all. And I think that's one of the things we harp on about, right? Is that employee experience or employment isn't a product, because a product kind of is like one thing that sits on a shelf that you can buy, right? And I always use a tin of beans. A tin of beans is a tin of beans. And therefore it doesn't really adapt unless it's spicy beans.
Sausages. Did you know you could get beans with sausages in? I'm sure you did know this.
I've got kids, of course I do. It's like the go-to meal for kids. And so it's that ability to offer that service, and which is employment is a service, right? Not a product. If you get to this product design thinking, use the approaches of product design, fine, but you're not designing a product, you're delivering a service, and therefore it has to be adaptable. Right, okay, chat's kicking off. Let's kick into chat. We got Bob. Hi, Bob. I like to replace employee experience with employee expectations, because if your experience is below expectations, then you're already at a loss. It changes the narrative from what shall I give you to what should I give. Now, that's very interesting, because as part of our model, right, we've got brand awareness and employer brand awareness. And if I looked at, I'm just trying to think of a company that I really love.
IKEA.
Okay, yeah, all right, okay. IKEA is a great organization. They do a lot for the environment. They build furniture. Actually, crucially, they don't build furniture. They manufacture and sell furniture that I can build at a price that I like, that it does all the things I need to do, right? So I have an expectation that they'll be a great employer. Like, that is just my baked in expectations that they will be a great employer. Organizations, I've even talked about this, right? I'm going to talk about it straight right now, because the company technically doesn't exist anymore. But O2, I loved O2 as a brand. I was like, they are so freaking cool. They have O2 Academies, they have the O2 Arena. This is going to be the coolest place to work. And it wasn't. It was just like every large company. And so therefore my expectations weren't met. And so this is where employee expectations aren't just about, and then this is where employer brand winds me up slightly, is because it isn't just about your employer brand. It's about how are you matching with your actual brand, like your consumer brand, because they might be just setting you up for a fall, like in O2. Like they literally create such a strong consumer brand that when I got there as an employee, I was disappointed.
How
And
did you manage that disappointment? Like literally, as
well, I
Bob
left
said,
within
you just
9
drop out.
months. Is
Oh,
how
okay.
but look, they had this really cool thing called the Welcome Lounge, which was a website. It wasn't actually a physical space. And it's like, log in and you can learn all about O2 before you join. And I was like clicking around going, oh, it's pretty cool. I've not had this before. And then I was like, I saw like the CEO took me from reception to where his desk was. And I was like, oh, and then I saw where the HR space was. Like, oh, actually, not too far away from where the CEO sits. And then I joined, and that wasn't even the CEO anymore. The CEO was someone completely different. And it's like, oh, but it's that the expect, to Bob's point, expectation. My expectation that this dude Ronan was going to be the CEO, and it was actually this guy called Mark. I was like, well, when did this happen? Already you've not met my expectations, not because you've intentionally lied to me or deceived me. You haven't intentionally done it, even if it's by accident or sheer laziness in not being able to update that welcome lounge.
So I'm thinking now I'm taking that commerciality to humanity scale into the recruitment process, right? Because from a commercial point of view, you want to hire the best, like purely commercial, you want to hire the best person at the best price as quickly as possible because they're going to get up to speed quickest and then be productive as quickly as possible, right? But maybe you're not, if you, the pure people side would be like, I want somebody who is in a role who is going to, that's going to flourish in that role, that's going to do really well in that role, that is the role is right for them, right? So you absolutely need a balance because, like you said, O2 hired you against mismatched expectations. They didn't think about how necessarily you would feel in that role based on everything that they told you, and so therefore they lost you after 9 months, and then they had to, replace you. And if we're taking estimated costs of an employee, PAYE employee costs 1.7 times their salary, right, in a year. And then there's also extra hiring costs and all of that. And that's the disputed figure, but that's the figure I'm going with. Like, it's just really, really crazy costs, right? And if you were thinking as balanced, you'd actually probably make more money in the long run and get people slightly less disappointed. I was going to say happier. I'm trying to avoid the word happier because I don't think happiness is necessarily the right way of describing it. But we'll go with less disappointed for now.
Yeah, well, if we think about performance reviews, meet expectations, exceed expectations, or doesn't meet expectations. In that instance, the organization didn't meet my expectations. They never asked for that feedback, whether they were meeting my expectations or not.
Have you ever had that, like, where you, like, they say to you, this is how you're doing against your targets, and you go, well, this is how you're doing against your targets? How good would that be?
That's pretty, like, I mean, and this is the mutually beneficial relationship between employee and employer that no one designs for, or
No, but
very
it would
few
be a
people
great
do.
way to track it, is what I'm thinking. Like, literally, if
Yeah.
in the performance review you had that, and then you had before you got your performance review back, because it could be skewed based on the feedback you got, and then you'd have such a good way to track it, like quantitative data.
Okay, next live stream, pin a note, how to redesign performance reviews. Because we got more comments. We've got Andy Cracknell, who has joined us before. So welcome back, Andy. He just joined, but that was 5 minutes ago. Because Bob's comment took a while to get through. But thank you, Bob. I hope you're still tuning in. Great to hear from you. And Andy, likewise. He's just joined. This stuff is such a sensitive subject for me right now. Cool. Well, I hope everything is well your end, Andy. And it pivots on emotional intelligence and life experience to understand how your message lands. So many leaders take a dictatorial approach. Here's my message. You will listen. You will hear. You will accept. I think this is kind of what I just said, right? But it alienates everyone except the leader. I disagree that it alienates everyone except the leader, because there will be people that are like the leader, not necessarily like the leader, but are like the leader, where we will just land. Because I mean, the example that we've just seen, but it doesn't work for everyone. Andy then follows up: the impact of getting it wrong is catastrophic. Agreed. And yet, not enough leaders care to recognize the fact and wonder why employee engagement is low. It's that element of self-reflection, right? That, to your point in terms of the personal development review, is like, how are you reflecting on yourself as a leader? Have I told the Michael Jordan story before? Have you heard that one?
Not for at least 6 months. So
Okay. Well, let's pedal out. So a good friend of mine, Patrick Malarkey, told me once I was like Michael Jordan, and I took that as one of the greatest moments of my career because Michael Jordan, obviously a legendary basketballer for the Chicago Bulls. I had several Michael Jordan jerseys and pairs of Air Jordans growing up, and I was like, this is amazing. And then he said, well, watch the Netflix documentary The Last Dance and then tell me whether you're happy about it. And essentially everything you've talked about there, Andy, Michael Jordan did. He was like, you're either with me or against me. And to the detriment of the interpersonal relationships, right? He had some really great relationships with some great players because that they liked him, they liked the way he communicated, and they like that. And some of them didn't. And they absolutely fell by the wayside because of that, because Michael Jordan was obviously this superstar, so had this clout within that team to do that. And that, reflect, like I said, reflect on my own leadership style. Is like, I've done that. I've been so ignorant to the fact about what I would say and do having a negative impact. It's like, well, I did say and tell you and that should have been enough. Of course it's not enough. Of course it's not. So that's the mic. And if you haven't watched The Last Dance, do watch it because it's absolutely fascinating. Just getting insight into Michael Jordan, but the interpersonal relationships of working in a team. Like if we're going to tangentially link it back to work, that's what you get out of it.
So we talked a lot about the kind of the pitfalls of being too commercially focused, but I feel like we need to go the other side now and talk about the people who are too people focused.
Absolutely. I just before we do that, Sarah has said Lego. I think that is
company. She's talking about company.
Yeah. So I would agree. Not worked for Lego. Pitched to him a couple of times, and didn't get the work. But as far, one of my best mates actually did work for Lego, and he said he'd go back if the opportunity arose. He said he'd go back, and that's kind of one of those leading indicators that says actually it's probably an all right place to be. Do you get free Lego would be my first question, or at least heavily discounted. That's what I want. That's what I want.
Is that what motivates you? And people, okay, to on that point,
is it what motivates me?
No. Okay, so you're saying that the only thing, or the most important thing that motivates you is Lego, and this is why people are like, oh, I don't know what my employees want, and they don't necessarily know how to make them more engaged, because if you ask people what they want, they say stuff like free Lego, when that's not actually going to make any tangible difference to how they feel in the workplace.
Oh, sorry, I was just cleaning my glasses. You're absolutely right, because at O2, I got free tickets. I got free tickets to go to music stuff, and that was one of the draws, but that wasn't enough to mask the disappointment of the leadership, the team dynamics, all this kind of stuff. So yeah, it's a good point. But Bob has also chipped in. Am I doing enough to make my team members successful? Imagine if all leaders ask themselves that honestly, and that's it, right? And I think as a CEO, I'm not a CEO, but a CEO of a large organization, right? That's hard to do when you've got 30,000 people. So you've got to live and breathe it through every single leader within an organization, right? That there has to be this duality of I give you stuff and you give me stuff, and there is a balance. Whereas whether our whole frustration with the world of work is that it is very one way. We get stuff from you. Yes, of course, we pay you, but we give you like these very bland benefits packages that sit on top of literally every single employer, certainly here in the UK, that doesn't really, to your point, it's just a list of stuff that you get rather than how does it make me feel? How am I engaged? All of those kind of stuff. Crucially, not am I happy? But now we have addressed some of those comments. Can we go back to your original question?
Let's look at the people who are too people focused and lacking the commercial side of things.
Well, for me, it's straightforward. In the you just cheers, Bob. See you later. Bob's got to go. Bob, watch us on catch up. We got another 15 minutes of chat that you're going to miss out on. Because in my experience, most organizations, the majority of individuals focus most on commerciality. Therefore, talking that language gets you further than if you talk with a people lens. Sad, but true. And therefore, if you are a people person and you double down on just exclusively talking about people stuff, that becomes a real issue, because you are trying to sell in some concepts which A, don't resonate, and B, because they don't resonate, won't get funded or any traction with the organization or any respect, because it's always done in like, to your point, happiness is a really interesting topic, right? It's like, we want to make employees happy. Do you? Is that it, happiness isn't really the objective of why anybody would come to work or why you'd want employees in the first place? Then you go to engagement and you're like, cool, well, tell me how you're measuring engagement, because if it's a survey question, do one. That's not good enough. That doesn't make
If it's
sense.
only a survey,
If it, yeah.
survey sometimes has its place if you have many, many, many people in your organization.
Absolutely. And we're gonna have to come back to Andy. Andy has put a mammoth comment in, and then just going, and then follows it up with, "Is that going too far?" So now I'm like drawn to this message. So I think it's you struggle to get people to care about the people stuff if you just talk about it in a human centric way, because it's going to have it's going to have a very real impact on the business performance.
So I think it depends. You read Andy's question while I talk.
Okay.
So I think it really does depend a little bit on the organization. I've worked with some places where either in the third sector slash not for profit, particularly if you are getting funding through alternative streams that are not, B2B or B2C, like, actual paying customers or clients. And then sometimes making money and profit can kind of be that dirty word. So when I worked for the Open Data Institute, it's gone through several iterations since then. But when I started in 2014, 2014, they were we kind of had this whole like mission versus margin thing, and it was like, well, so we have the margin generating work, and that's I'm summarizing, but that's where
Mhm.
we charge clients, lots of commercial clients, corporate, the private sector clients, lots of money to do the same stuff that we do for really cheap in other places because it's funded by government grants or places like USAID. I've forgotten what they're called, like donors, right?
Mhm.
NGOs and things like that. And it was really it really damaged the business because everybody had this mindset that you can have mission stuff, which is what we want to do, which is a really worthwhile stuff, and margin stuff. And I do remember talking to one of the other people in my team who was like, I know you think I'm the face of corporate evil, but like we've absolutely got to be making money here. And I was quite young in 2014 and quite immature in a way. And I'd kind of been fed this whole idea that you could have mission or margin, you couldn't have both together. And like now I'm obviously like, well, of course you were obviously right. Of course you were. You need to have that balance. So I think sometimes I'm not in it for the money. It's like a kind of a virtue, or it's seen as a virtue type
Mm.
thing, particularly for people who take jobs that are less well paid. So maybe in the public sector, maybe in the third sector. And I wonder if that's also something that's very common in HR. I'm not here for the money because I don't get paid very well. So if I wanted to make money, I wouldn't be here. I would be in a different role. And maybe that mentality sort of bleeds through, to use a quite graphic term, bleeds through into how they see everything.
Well, that virtuism translates into just the general running of a charity anyway. So, the
Yeah.
numerous charities that we talk to is like, well, we're not here to make money. It's like, I know you're not. You're here because you're trying to affect this change in society, the environment, whatever. But more money means you have more impact. Oh yeah,
Means
but
you
we're
do
not a
more good stuff.
yeah, but it's always seen as this, and this is why I still refer to it as a spectrum, right? It's like, well, we can't be seen to be too commercial, otherwise we're not. But it makes no sense, right? And UNICEF, I always call that as an example, is like they have no business trying to make millions of pounds hosting a football match, selling tickets, the rights to said football match, all that. That doesn't make any sense. If you were to kind of go, well, how are we helping children? In that world, how are we helping children by doing a football match with celebrities? We're not. But what we're doing is generating a hell of a lot of revenue as a result, which gives us more impact. And so, and this is where the charity model, I think, is ripe for disruption, because you want to be able to do both. You want to be able to have that balance.
I think if we're talking about people disrupting the charity model, that's Chris Chamberlain of Guernsey Mind is doing some very interesting work in this area.
good friend Chris Chamberlain. If you're not connected with him, get connected with him because he's an awesome chap. Right, Andy's comment. It's a long one.
Summarize it for me.
All right. Who do you think I am? ChatGPT. A first AI joke of the day. So Andy did goes, a question based on that, based on the shift of topic that we're going to. That Andy essentially, and I'm paraphrasing Andy, so apologies if I do get any of it slightly wrong, but Andy was leading an individual who the HR and leadership went, this person's not going to pass their probation, they're awful, but Andy saw that potential and had that what I would probably call pastoral care that kind of got them to a place after 9 months where they passed their probation after 9 months and then were employee of the month 9 months in a row. And so, but that's because Andy reflects, I think, and says because you took on that full-on human approach. I would also argue that makes way more commercial sense to invest your time as a leader in that organization to do that rather than binning them off trying to recruit and rehire. Like, surely that makes more sense. And this is the thing, right? Is that what is the spend analysis in that scenario? Like, what is the spend? Like, what was the actual spend in the scenario that you said there, Andy? But what was the alternative, and how much was that going to cost? Because again, I absolutely applaud. That is the right thing to do on a human level, but that most of the time will not wash with business leaders because they're just like, no.
Unless you come with the figures and you say, actually, okay, and it's still a gamble, but everything in life is a gamble of some sort or another, right? But if you're saying, okay, keeping that person and keeping them to pass their probation means you don't have to recruit, rehire, retrain, and potentially have the same thing in 3, 4, 5, whatever months' time, right? So then you need to work out the maths. This is how much I saved you. So therefore, if it happens again, I've got my business case right there. And that's the thing that I think that fully human approach is sometimes lacking, and why Toby says it doesn't wash and you don't get sometimes it is permission to do these kind of things and to invest a little bit more time or effort or money into whatever it is, in listening to people and giving them what it is that they actually need on a human to human basis, because it's harder to see the return.
Yeah. Andy says the key bit though is showing emotion. And yes, because there was a bit I missed out that Andy got tearful in the review because of how much Andy cared with that individual. Of course, that makes a lot of sense. You've gone on this this journey together, and so that makes sense. So that openness and that vulnerability and that emotion, I think, is really important. And this is where TikTok's awash of it at the moment, right? Where to your point, Andy, you said HR wanted to get rid of them. So in that situation, what happens is employee gets on a call with faceless person within HR and HR dismisses them because of performance-related issues. And people are recording those left, right, and centre because it's like, well, I don't know who you are. You have nothing to do with me. I've not seen you before, and you're the one dismissing me. Because in this scenario, Andy, again, assuming you're the leader in this scenario, it should be Andy dismissing them. Really, like that.
Yeah, with HR checking that he's doing it in a legal compliant way.
Yeah, exactly right. So this is the kind of cop out mentality that we have in leadership, and I think I was challenged on it on LinkedIn a couple of days ago. That do you really think that we can hand off some HR conversations to leaders? And I'm like, well, a couple of things. If you can't, I'd question whether they're the right leaders to have in your organization, which again we're going through that process with a couple of people at the moment. But you got to at least try. Like, you can't just sit there and go, oh well, they'll never be able to have these difficult conversations. And like, what? Why do you think that? Because you've not. It's about empowering them to have those conversations, not taking it away from them. And I think that's where the policy and process gets in the way, is that Andy shouldn't feel like he has to go over and above to bring in the emotion and that element of pastoral care, because it should just be baked in, as well with the operational and commercial rigor that it defines. And this goes back to the beginning, is that it is a balance between the two. I am never going to suggest that someone should just be overtly commercial and someone should be overtly empathetic or human focused. But I think you have to have a balance, because that's just the way business. That is just the business model. That's the way capitalism. Like, you have to be able to transfer monetary value between these two entities, because if you don't, then what is the point? Like, it doesn't make the relationship doesn't make sense if there's no give and take of value, of what is a perceived equal amount or a fair balance. No, it's not going to be equal, obviously, but it's got to be a fair balance of that. Okay, all right. Okay.
You definitely said, what am I going to add to that? Like, yeah, absolutely, you're right. It has to. It's that fair balance. And I was thinking, I went on a little bit of a tangent in my mind. I was thinking about all the other things that HR tries to outsource out to managers. And if you have the correct training of how, or not even the correct training, but like if you can find out the essential do's and don'ts of these conversations. What do you have to cover? What don't you have to cover? And that can exist anywhere, right? Like if it's in something that is approved by HR, and then you don't even necessarily have to talk to a person. If there's a very clear list, and then whatever else you have in a conversation with HR, so you can feel that you can be equipped to have those conversations yourself as a leader. I know why lots of people don't do it, because it's extra work, and we're all pulled in multiple different directions all the time. And it's hard. And the human stuff is hard, and even harder is finding the balance between the two, right?
Yeah, I know the Office sitcom, both the UK and the US version, is a really good example, right? Is that both the managers in those sitcoms are promoted because they're really good at sales. They're really good at their job. But in both, they are absolutely awful at just any sort of human interaction. And so and therefore, like, the pyramid of work is kind of built in that model, because like you don't have to become a leader until you're actually a leader. And even in some organizations, reflected again what I was talking about, even organizations where I've been a leader, I haven't actually become a leader. I wouldn't even say I've necessarily completed. I don't think you'll ever complete the journey, but definitely further along the journey in the past 2 years than I ever have done any other leadership role, just because of what's at stake. But there's this. A leader isn't a doer. A leader might have to do some of the doing, absolutely, but if you're promoting based on experience, the the atypical hiring model, we're going to go, who's got the most experience and who's got the to be this leader. And this is, I don't want to be one of those LinkedIn people that talks about football, but I'm going to. There is a growing trend of football managers getting really young, like younger than me. Not saying I'm really young, but like traditionally, football managers would be people who played football for their whole lives, got to the very top, and then went, I'm going to be a football manager, and they'd be quite old. And now there's like managers that are in their early 30s become managers who haven't necessarily had great footballing careers, haven't got to the top of the game, but are great leaders of a team of people, which is what you need. I don't need a manager of a football team or any team, no, let's say a football team, to be great at football. Like, why would I need you to be good at football? That makes no sense. You're not playing.
You need to have enough, obviously, knowledge and experience. You need to know the rules of the game and
Well,
things
yeah.
like that, right? No. I'm following you. I'm following you completely. That you need to have enough context and understanding. So whether that's product knowledge, whether that's like kind of systems and experience, especially if you're taking on that kind of coaching, mentoring type role. But you don't have to be that expert person. You don't have to be the best at your job. And often the people who are best at their job just want to get on with their jobs, right?
And you go back to the thing you said, right? Is that I remember having a conversation with leader and kind of going, I just don't know what motivates my team. And it's like, the question you ask you is like, have you asked them? Have you had a conversation? Not ask them, because to your point, if you ask me what motivated me at Lego, like to have a job at Lego, it'd be free Lego, but that isn't what motivates me. But what having a great coaching conversation to uncover what actually motivates them, getting them to recognize it, you to recognize it, and to try and design a relationship that fulfills that, doesn't happen very often. But also you go to a football manager and they kind of go, well, you are let's say a world-class striker. Like, what do you need from me to make you perform at your very best? Not, hey, I used to be a world-class striker and this is how I
Here's
used to
what
hit the
I
ball.
did.
So, yeah, right. Which is what most managers do. It's like, well, this is how I did it, so you should probably do the same. And that's where, to Andy's point, it becomes a lot more human in that regard, because The scary thing is, like, you don't know where you're going to go with that conversation. Like, it's unplanned and not necessarily unstructured, but it's definitely like you don't know what the output's going to be.
It just made me think of, when we said that, think of the trust equation again, which I know is used a lot of the time for sales and things like that, and being a trusted advisor. But at the same time, it makes me think of a leader, and how you have trust in your leader. So because I'll probably mess it up, could you just explain
The
me?
trust equation is
Yeah.
credibility plus intimacy plus reliability divided by self-orientation.
And it's that self-orientation bit. So if we talk about credibility, do you know enough about this so you can be respected by the people? Have you done the job enough? You don't have to be top of the game, but have you done it enough? Intimacy, do you talk to the people you manage on like an emotional level? Reliability, do you do what you say you're going to do? And then it's that divided by self-orientation, how much do you make it about you? And I think it's absolutely true for leaders, as for people. And that's why you can't just go with a full on commercial mindset and a full on, like, right, this is what the numbers say. Or as I think it was Andy, might have been Bob, said earlier about how leaders, dictate and tell. You have to come from that. Actually, what is it that you need to get the best out of you?
Yeah. Yeah, I did miss a comment from Andy that said there's always the commercial calculation, but is it going to allow emotion in? And I think that's, in summary, right? There is always this element of conflict between the two that you kind of described about the NGO stuff, right? Is that you can have both.
Mm.
You can have both, and I think the humanity end of the scale thinks it can't be commercial, and the commercial end of the scale thinks it can't be human. It's like, well, it can. We just haven't designed the framework of work to enable that to happen, because we've delineated, the employee experience to one function, which is primarily driven by policy, with maybe a little bit of humanity sprinkled on top of the policy and all that kind of stuff, human-centered design. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Well, which is why we chose it as a topic, right? Have you got any other thoughts before we close out?
My final thought is you don't have to have this all within one person. I think this is why a team is important. And I know, yes, you might be a leader, but you might have other leaders who can complement this. And if you know that either the commercial side or the people side is a bit of the weakness of yourself, like, make efforts to address that. Like, either involve the perspective of somebody who's from the other side, from the dark side, or just be more open to challenging yourself, like kind of that devil's advocate. Am I thinking too commercially here? Am I thinking too much like people? How could I think about this more the other way?
Yeah.
Or work with someone who's the opposite to you. That would be my biggest advice. But that's easy to say for us too, right?
Well, yeah, quite. And but this is where you and I work really well together, is because we necessarily, because the thing we didn't talk about is where do we sit on this spectrum and how we work together, which maybe feels like a whole kind of live stream episode in itself. But we both might not necessarily be in the middle, but we both appreciate each other's perspectives where we might lean on different sides of the spectrum, and we can meet in the middle and have that conversation. There is this understanding of how the other person thinks and operates, and bringing that in. It's if I were to disregard what you say and think, and you were to disregard what I say and think, then we'd be in a hot mess, to be completely honest, because we'd either be doing everything I say and do, or doing everything you say and do. And in both of those situations, we don't have a viable business. The thing I would say in closing, actually, just as an interesting case study for people to look out for, is a company down the road. I know it says this way, so if you follow that sign, there's a lovely little company called Clever Goose, and they have an incredible platform, which I challenged them once. So they have created a platform that allows you, and this isn't a sponsored ad or anything, but they've created a platform that enables
Shame, where's that commercial?
Yeah, I know.
Kim?
Yeah, we should. Okay, I'll ask. Don't ask for the money later. That never works. But Clever Goose, if you want to be mentioned on future podcast and live stream episodes,
We will do it anyway because we believe in what you're doing.
Absolutely. So this free ad. No, so what they have built is this platform that enables leaders to have these HR conversations, because it goes, these are the things you need to say and do legally. These are the policies. These are the things you need to document. And you, as a leader, can have a better conversation. And there's two things, right? One thing, they put it inside an organization and they had to get rid of some HR people because it took away those things. which is a good thing for my mind. Like in my mind, that is a good thing. But the issue is that like actually those HR people could have probably, if they were future facing enough, they would have figured out, well, what do I do next? And I think that's where the industry's at, is that there is going to be this disruptive technology. The second thing was where I was at, was like, oh, okay, so why don't you just build a GPT with all this information in and then do it like that? And they were like, well, no, that doesn't make sense, because the element here which makes this successful is that it's a human conversation. We enable really good human conversation. We don't replace it, or we don't replace bad human conversation. We just enable really great human conversation. I was like, that's fucking amazing, because yes, that's absolutely what it should be. I, again, with my commercial hat on, I was like, well, the best thing to do would be create an AI tool that has the conversation with the people for you, and it's just managed. And that there will be a company out there that does that to their detriment, because to Andy's point, it will take away the emotion. So just a shout out to Clever Goose, who have built that platform with intent to enable great human conversations. And again, it's not to the detriment of we're not adopting technology or not being commercially focused. It's like, well, actually you are, but you also need to think about a more holistic employee experience. Once you've sorted that bit, your job isn't done. You can't just get the HR people out of the way, or the people out of the way, but you've got to design this holistic employee experience strategy that takes care of all the other stuff, where that stuff was taking the time, like taking up time and space before. There's going to be time and space left to do other more interesting stuff that I'm sure we'd all want to do, other than just managing conversations. And with that, Emilie, it's been an absolute delight to have you back on Freeformers Unplugged, our live stream, rather than me shipping in randomers. Not randomers, but
different people,
our
special guests.
Our special guests. Next week, we're going to be at Whipsnade Zoo. Haven't really given any thought to how or when we might live stream next week. We might ... live stream from a zoo is one of the options. And I figured out technically how to do it. I just need to understand from the zoo whether I'm allowed to do it. So we might have a live stream featuring animals. Who knows? Anyway, this has been Freeformers Unplugged, once again, live on LinkedIn and on podcast and on YouTube and on Twitch and feasibly anywhere that will have us. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you